back to the Dealist, your insider's guide to navigating the complex world of M&A, now in its 4th season. AI has crossed the tipping point in deal-making, but our benchmark report of 400 global senior deal professionals shows that technology is now outpacing firms' ability to actually govern it. Nearly half of the deal teams say that AI is fully integrated across most of the deal process, yet 4 in 5 have actually suffered an AI-related security incident in the past year. What we're also seeing is senior-level resistance to the use of AI tools in an M&A process. What does this inflection point mean for deal makers, and how should firms go about closing that gap between capability and control? To unpack the contents of the AI survey benchmark report, I have been joined by Liam Stoker from Reuters Professional, who led the research and authored the report. Welcome back to the Dealist, Liam. And joining him is Ashwin Moranganti, Chief Product Officer at SS&C Intralinks, who sees firsthand how deal makers are actually putting to use AI-powered platforms such as DealCentre AI. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us today. Let's start with the big picture before we really drill down into the 6 key findings of the report. Liam, talk us through, can you set the scene? What was the goal of this year's study, and what are the key headline takeaways?
Of course, thanks, Catherine, and thrilled to be back on the Dealist for the 4th season. So to give a bit of a background on this, we surveyed 400 senior deal professionals throughout Q1 this year, and we just get a fairly even split across private equity, corporates, advisors, investment banking, venture capital, and law firms. We did that because really over the conversation that we've had over the last 2 years has been kind of, are deal makers actually using AI? But that question's pretty much answered now, we would have thought. Like you said at the top of the show, 49% say it's kind of fully integrated across most of their process. And another 41% actually said it's partially integrated. So effectively 9 in 10 they're actually saying that they've moved past the pilot stage when it comes to AI. So this year we wanted to kind of move that forward and take the conversation one step ahead of that, and really ask that harder question of, yes, it's here, we have AI, but is it actually under control? And the honest answer that we had coming out of the data is probably not quite yet. 4 in 5 firms have kind of reported that AI-related security incident in the last year, and just over half say that they've actually had some senior pushback, and that's actually kind of increased rather than kind of decreased. So the kind of big picture takeaway for us this year has very much been, yes, AI has arrived, but as you kind of alluded to again at the top of the show, it's AI adoption is really outpacing governance. Deal makers are looking at to what actually do they need to do to close that gap, and what's going to separate the businesses that truly benefit from AI rather than those that maybe even get burned by it.
And you mentioned a really interesting point there. You not just talk about an AI tool, but a tool kit. And we actually found that typical deal teams now manage 3 to 5 AI tools simultaneously, with over a quarter of the respondents using more than 6 tools at the same time. And Ashwin, that's where I'd like to bring you into the conversation, because this is exactly what we're seeing in deal rooms as well, isn't it? That deal teams are juggling 3 to 5 tools just to get through the process. So talk me through what's driving this sort of sprawl of tools that people are having to use. And is this a case of the market still finding its feet, or is it something that has much more to do with customization? And is this just the new normal that we all have to get our head around, that we're going to have to navigate lots of different tools while working on one process?
Yeah, first, thank you, Catherine, for having me on this podcast. First thing is that this shouldn't really come as a surprise. Even before AI, if you think about due diligence, you're always calling the different experts, the legal experts, the financial experts, the real estate experts, the ESG experts, and nobody expected one generalist to cover all of that, right? So it's not surprising that each of these experts are now showing up with their own AI assistant, right? And it's sharpened for their domain. And it's not 5 tools more. The way I look at it, it's like 5 specialists who now each carry a much sharper one, you know. But what's different is that, in this time is these five experts used to be invited to the data room and they used to read the documents there, right? So the documents stayed where they were and people came to it. And now they want the five assistants, the five AI assistants, each wanting to reach into this data itself. And that's not really, a people problem anymore. It's an access problem. And that's exactly where governance has to catch up. So I think you'll talk about that, shortly.
You led us quite nicely onto the issue of sort of governance, security, and accuracy. In fact, I'd like to spend some time talking about exactly that topic, because the next key finding that we made in the report is that 80% of deal makers, and that's quite a staggering number, experience an AI-related security or accuracy incident in the past 12 months. Now, I'm sure all of us have played around with AI and the result has come back and we've all gone like, good grief, this doesn't make sense. This can't actually be right. But it's interesting that we also obviously see this in the M&A context here. Liam, talk us through what these incidents actually look like in the day-to-day. Is this like a catastrophic breach territory that we're thinking about, or is it something slightly more insidious? And when will the technology get better? Is this something where as AI learns, as it matures, these mistakes won't happen? Or is it just part and parcel? If we're going to use AI, there is always going to be the danger of mistakes being made.
Certainly. I mean, some good news for the sector at large is that certainly the impression that we've had from the research is that these kind of incidents are not the kind of grand headline grabbing incidents where kind of AI is breaking containment, like we've seen kind of in those headline grabbing news recently. The leading incident type that we captured within the study was access control lapses. So if you give an agent too much permission, it's pulling documents it shouldn't have touched, or it's making unwanted changes somewhere along the process. It's those kind of incidents rather than any kind of broad scale attack or, like I said, AI breaking containment. Second most common, I think was reported by around 40% of respondents, is those hallucinations, which have become quite famous now. So and those kind of hallucinated outputs making their way into due diligence work. So that's a made up figure or misread clause that kind of someone didn't catch within their kind of overview. So it's less AI is going rogue and much more we gave the tool too much room, we trusted his output too much, and that's where we've fallen down. So this is something we've seen surveying AI adoption across multiple other sectors outside, whether it's insurance, life sciences, energy. These kind of incidents come up, and they come up commonly. Will it get better as the technology matures? Perhaps. I'd probably push back slightly on that. The data actually shows the opposite pattern to what we may have hoped. So the firms with the deepest AI integration, advisory firms, private equity, venture capital, they're more likely to report those higher incidence rates rather than lower. So kind of as you would expect, law firms equally who've adopted AI probably slightly more cautiously, they're more insulated. So the inference we could probably take is that more sophisticated tools don't automatically have the fix for this.
Okay.
Deeper usage kind of results in kind of the more prominent incident of these kind of things happening. But what we do see is that the proportionate governance is crucial now. So this is much more of a organizational issue to fix rather than a technical one.
Okay, thank you very much. Ashwin, I'd like to bring you into the conversation and ask about the company's Model Context Protocol, MCP. And this is a term that we've been hearing quite a lot recently, but can you please, before we get into the ins and outs of it, explain to our listeners what this actually means?
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of a leeway and answer this very carefully. Before I answer that directly, I want to name this problem, because I think it's bigger than what people realize. Right now, there is a real wild, wild west problem there. People are downloading from the secure data rooms and uploading these documents into whatever AI tool that they are using. And it's making everyone nervous for different reasons. Naturally, the seller and the sell-side advisor are nervous because once the document leaves the data room, and there's no traceability, right? No idea where it's actually gone and who's using that document and the information there in it. And maybe more surprisingly, even the buyers are nervous now. They used to like come into the data room, download the documents, and they wanted to do whatever they want. But the buyers are nervous because what if they downloaded their file last week and it's been updated since then? That could be making a decision off of a stale document even without knowing it. Imagine making multi-million or billion-dollar decisions on some stale data. And that's the problem, MCP actually is trying to solve. It is a model context protocol came up invented by Anthropic. It is a way for AI to connect to third-party data. We cannot bring all data wherever it is onto the AI. So we take AI to the data itself. And it's a standardized protocol that they have come up with, and it's pretty much very well adopted now. What we have made a two-layer architecture here. Anybody can really come up with a standard MCP servers, but what we have done is it's built so that the deal administrator, not the AI vendor, decides which applications are even allowed in. Documents will never leave our environment, and every touch is logged. If Sarah Chen has been given access to a file, and she's going to bring in her favorite Claude to the deal, right? Claude will see only what Sarah Chen is authorized to see. That's what we have made sure. The permissions are, we hold it like, the Holy Grail. So we didn't just build an AI feature, we built the security parameter that AI has to pass through. And that controls, as the report talks about the access control lapses as one of the big security incidents. So we control that first layer. And the second thing what we have done is a lot of the MCP integrations just hand over the document. They had APIs, they wrap these APIs and just give it to the AI tool. But that's not, imagine 10,000 documents in a deal room, and then we're just sending out to the other side, and that AI intelligence outside could be having access to this information and several other information. And that's where hallucination comes in. So what we have done is we have made this AI tool talk to our AI. So one of the MCP tools that we build is Ask Deal AI, and that talks to our AI. So we first digest all of that information. Our AI is built inside our data center, and it only will answer about the deal documents, no hallucination. And that's, absolutely important. Okay.
So tell me, what's the feedback from your clients been on this one?
They love, I think they're loving it. People have said that we should open a bottle of champagne, once you have introduced this thing, because it's allowing to let us do our jobs and bring our intelligence assistant while not being worried that, I'm not giving information that it's not supposed to. That's one. And the second thing they like our AI to AI integration is that, our AI does not hallucinate. We just gave the corpus of the intelligence to this AI is only the deal documents. So if you ask about anything about how to make a bomb or anything, we will never answer that, But we are very careful. We have good guardrails. So customers are loving it, So.
Okay, super. I'd like to sort of move forward through the report and get to one finding that I personally found absolutely fascinating, which was that senior resistance is growing even as adoption rates are accelerating. And here we found that more than half, 57% of Dealmakers report that senior level resistance to AI has increased in the last 12 months. And the reason are being cited as accuracy concerns, explainability, fiduciary risks, and also the client perception of the use of AI is being cited as sort of the primary drivers for this resistance that we're seeing from seniors in the M&A community. Liam, talk to me. What do you feel this finding means for the use of AI going forward? Because obviously we need the buy-in from the top to really drive it throughout the business. Otherwise, we're going to have a situation where we have sort of a shadow system being used by some people within the organization, but not necessarily the top of the organization.
Exactly. And it's hugely consequential, because one thing that we've always found within any kind of study is that senior buy-in is the thing that really turns a tool that's kind of picked up from a minority staff, like you say, or kind of buried within a pilot program that doesn't really go anywhere, to this kind of actual firm-wide capability, which drives those efficiencies and those productivity gains. Probably to kind of look at what's really driving that resistance. I mean, it's probably entirely fair and legitimate, rather than just senior stubbornness to change it at large. And those kind of accuracy concerns we've spoken about are really prominent, as is the need for explainability and the fiduciary risk. They were kind of picked up by just less than half of those that we spoke to for the study. So these are people who kind of sign their name to evaluate evaluation or a diligence report, and they're right to really want to understand how the AI got there before they put their signature to it. So kind of one of the things I'd probably lean on is don't read this as AI hitting a ceiling, which could be an easy kind of interpretation to lean on. We actually held an event for finance leaders talking about AI late last year, and it was the Bank of America CIO, I believe, who made a point in one of our kind of interviews on site that we actually kind of referenced within the report. They really took a look at training their senior leadership from the very top CEO downward, specifically on things like risk of hallucination and bias within the models, before looking to roll out anything more broadly. So this is the kind of approach that we see working, we see evidence of working. And the firms that get this right at the moment, they're not trying to convert skeptics into believers or anything like that. They're building literacy at the top, so that the senior people, when they're speaking to people within the business, they have the ability to actually govern the tool that they're being asked to trust first and foremost. So leadership from the very top is absolutely critical.
Do you think there's something possibly also in that these people with a seniority, they have the experience to understand what the consequences of a mistake are, because they've actually possibly seen that in action? Ashwin, you're nodding along there. I mean, do you think there is some merit to that thought?
Yeah, totally. I mean, as you said, it's a trust problem first before it's a training problem. Training will fix, people don't know how to use this. It doesn't fix, I can't explain to a client or a regulator why this AI has reached this conclusion, right? And that's really a governance gap, not a skills gap. And vendors need to make this trust very demonstrable. Audit trails, provenance, clear boundaries of what AI actually touched and where it got the answer. So it gives the confidence to the senior management. As you said, the partner can stand behind a decision if it's challenged later. Think about every small company. Every time a problem happens, we're all like, who did this? Where did you get this information? All of that, right? We want the same kind of confidence that when you ask AI, where did you get this answer? We know from here, from this document, from this page. So it's all traceable, and whether this information should have been, available to that person, all of these things. So once we get that trust, increased, and then, the senior resistance is going to move away because,
And how do you think you can address this trust issue? I mean, is it just demonstrating over and over again the capability, or how do you build that trust?
We build this trust by showing that, there's very little hallucination, and every information that is produced has a sourceable and traceability, to exact place where the information is. And, the information and the permissions that people have. So once you enforce that, they will gain trust,
Data drives deals today. Cut through the noise and get to what matters with DealCentre AI, powered by Link, your AI assistant. Turn raw deal data into meaningful insight, and insight into real competitive advantage. See more opportunities, close more deals, stay secure. Transform your deal making with DealCentre AI.
Now, I'd like to loop back with the next finding to sort of what we talked about earlier, this question of specialization, not consolidation. Again, going back to the findings that tell us that deal makers are using lots of different AI tools, using lots and lots of digital experts, as we'll call them, after Ashwin introduced sort of that whole concept. talk to me about how sustainable this really is. Can it really be that for the rest of M&A going forward, we're going to have to juggle all these different tools, or will platforms emerge that combine different levels of expertise? Liam, maybe I can come to you first of all, and then Ashwin, bring you into the conversation.
Sure. So I think if we're speaking about the kind of 49% who want specialized tools and then they kind of each excelling at those kind of single function, whilst more than half expect functionality to be included as standard in deal making software, I think, is that sustainable? Possibly. I think you'll probably see a fair amount of consolidation within that piece as well. But I think they're probably two distinct questions, and they're probably coming from people that are actually doing that sourcing, diligence, valuation. They just want the best tool for each job and to really see that AI is making their life easier. Whereas those sat perhaps in the CIO or the CTO seat where the proliferation of these tools is that risk. So more tools, more vendors, more permissions, more contact area for these tools that you forget. It's easy to forget that these tools are still relatively nascent as well. And I think they will be coming for kind of forwards with more and more developments. That connects straight back to the security of data that we've already spoken about, those control lapses, the exactly the kind of incident you'd expect to increase in users, that kind of tool suite or tool stack becomes to get to 6, 8, 10 different platforms that you're losing. So rather than it being kind of viewed as sustainable, I think the next phase is that kind of specialized capability that's delivered through fewer, better governed access points, whether that is through an MCP, which, as Ashwin has alluded to, is solving a lot of these issues. And I think then it's a case of how is that embedded into platforms that you already trust, rather than looking to bolt on more and more standalone tools to hit on different touch points of the M&A process.
Okay, thank you very much. Ashwin, can I ask you, can you give a little bit of insight into what these different tools actually are, like literally specifically the way that you did earlier in the conversation, and then a bit more level of detail onto what's driving that specialization?
Yeah, as you see, I mean, it's real specialization by task, contract and redlining tools, it's like, that's a legal space. You have research and diligence tools, that's market research. There are data from PitchBook and AlphaSense, and all of those things need to be put together and do research on the targets. And then there is financial modeling tools, so there are each built around one narrow high stakes jobs. And there are multiple startups coming into those areas. There might be consolidation in those areas, but that's a pattern across the entire, report you have seen. A tool that's excellent at one thing will definitely beat a platform that's mediocre at all 10, right? So, but I think the report undersells something else here. People aren't just buying a tool. They're also buying a partner. Think about, let me just give an example of an Excel. Think about Excel. If you had a question about valuation model, would you rather call Microsoft support or call an actual valuation expert who knows Excel inside out? And people will naturally pick in the second one, right? So vendors are developing the expertise not to just provide a tool and throw it to the other side, but be the partners to them and be the legal partner or the valuation partner or anything like that. And these vendors are building teams of forward deployed engineers, for their customers. And if the analysts are having an issue and we ask them to, hey, you can write a Claude skill for that, it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to learn that. And so these forward deployed engineers are coming in and they will write the skills for the analysts. So that's the kind of support vendors are also providing. And so we shouldn't underestimate that. So we talked about earlier, there is about domain intelligence, it's very important. And so, they want partners, not just with the intelligence, the data and the domain. So.
Super. Thank you very much. I think it's really important to the point that you made that there is a human element to this as well. A partner, someone that you're working with, someone that you can contact, not just something that you plug into a website. So thank you very much for making that point that is often forgotten in M&A, that it is at the end all about people. Now, the last finding I thought was really interesting in that deal makers are ready for autonomous AI, but governance needs to keep pace with this. And there we found that 4 in 5 deal makers are actually comfortable with AI executing multi-step deal workflows autonomously. And I think that's really fascinating considering the conversation that we had earlier about the mistakes that are still being made. Liam, how do we square these two findings? How do we square the appetite for autonomy with the incident data that we talked about? Is this overconfidence, or is this a genuine belief that over time governance will catch up?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think it's overconfidence exactly. We see that it's probably more that comfort with the kind of autonomy we're talking about tracks pretty closely with how deeply people have integrated these tools. So when we look at the survey respondents on a respondent by respondent line, the people that describe themselves as very comfortable handling AI with multi-step workflows, they're the very same people that are leading on integration. So they're within advisory firms and investment banks, and on the kind of opposite side, corporates were the most cautious around this. So it's probably less we're kind of pushing forward with this and we're being reckless and we're solving issues after. It's much more, we have this tool, we've used it, we're very confident, we're now pushing this and progressing this into much more of the advanced capabilities that people are kind of really speaking to. So on the equal side of that though it's not necessarily settled. So when we have asked what deal makers want fixed in AI tools over the next 5 years, security and accuracy are tied for the very top spot. So yes, they want this autonomy and they see this as a real push. So equally, security and accuracy, they really do need to be fixed. So that's probably, or certainly the conclusion that we've reached, is that very much the market kind of telling everyone that the guardrails aren't quite there yet, even while it's autonomy is yes. And I'd frame this as very much the appetite for this is very, very genuine. They're moving forward cautiously, but it's an appetite that's currently running ahead of that governance infrastructure that's needed to make the whole thing feel safe. And that's probably the report in a nutshell, really. It's the fact that this is moving very quickly. The governance infrastructure needs to catch up. And when it does, that's when this whole thing can really kind of extrapolate further.
Okay. Now, Ashwin, I'd like to bring you in. How surprised were you by this finding? I mean, is there something where you looked at it and you're like, yeah, that was sort of to be expected, or did it surprise you a little bit?
Yeah, one thing, we shouldn't be, if the people said that they want autonomy by this year, I would be surprised. But, the question was by 2030. And so, yes, that shouldn't be, I'm not hugely surprised by that, The deal teams already run on, nice checklists and defined processes. Autonomy isn't a new idea to them. It's just extending the trust from, the analysts and the functional teams to a system. What determines how fast that appetite turns into practice isn't whether people are comfortable with autonomy in principle. It's whether the governance around it is visible enough to trust when the information goes wrong. Right? All the time we want to know, what is the thinking behind it? How did you come to that decision? Where did you get that information from? And if outcomes are coming in, and if people are able to constantly find, this is why it is saying this, and this is where it is coming from, and then people will just get the confidence. So I think autonomy is coming, but it's it's not now, but it's yes, absolutely before 2030. So
okay. Now, Liam, you teed me up very, very nicely for the sort of the wrap up of this podcast when you said that things are moving incredibly quickly. And I was going to ask you guys if you were able to predict what the results would look like if we conducted exactly this survey a year again from now. How will AI have impacted the way that we engage with M&A activity, the way that deal makers conduct themselves during an M&A process? Liam, maybe your predictions first of all.
It's a great question. I think we at Reuters Insights have now been tracking kind of AI adoption for the last 4 years, specifically within the finance sector, the last 3. And if there's one thing that I think I've learned, is that my predictions always are proven to be absolutely incorrect and way out of date by the time we even get around to reassessing them. So, if I do
Love the honesty.
yeah, if I do have one there, I just really think that this is really going to accelerate. I don't think that that 49% that we think is fully integrated now, I think that will comfortably grow year to year and will continue to accelerate. And I think that movement will probably be seen on a number of fronts. I think you may see some tool consolidation. I think there's been enough kind of development in that space since we conducted the study, particularly if you look at what's being released in just the last kind of 3 to 4 months in these kind of dedicated sector-specific tools from the likes of Anthropic. I think that's probably a no-brainer there. And I think that level of comfort and the ways that providers are kind of addressing some of these security incidents, I think you may start to see senior resistance start, if not dip slightly, certainly plateau. So I think that will be not just because the concerns get resolved. I think it would just be because we've spoken about the leadership issues. I think they will get around that, and that the way that the training of these senior leadership representatives as well, I think will convert that anxiety to cautious approaches rather than any kind of blanket pushback. So I think we'll start to see that kind of really ease as well.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. Ashwin, your predictions for the future?
Yeah, I think adoption is going to happen. That's no doubt about it, and it's already there. It's going to be about the maturity and the integration. I keep wanting to. Today, the whole discussion is about smarter models, and that's all people talk about. For M&A jobs, it's actually like 3 things. One is the domain intelligence, which the model companies don't have. It's where the intelligence sits on the user side. And then it's the model. Then the third one is also the data. And the data is sometimes your own internal practices, right? The deal room data, internal practices, the pitch book data. It's the combination of all 3. And people who integrate this well, provide the kind of vendor support that I talked about, and able to trace the decision making. How did we make this decision? What is the thinking that went behind it? And where is the source of information? The people who articulate and put these solutions together, and that's where the winners are going to be. And so we're going to be talking about which one of these tools, the governance maturity and all of that stuff. And those are going to be, what's the next year topics surveys will be.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. Now, listen, guys, thank you so much for sharing all your insights into this really, really interesting topic. This is unfortunately all that we have time for in today's episode of The Dealist. For those of you who'd like to read the full report, the link will be in the show notes. Ashwin and Liam, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your enthusiasm for the topic. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, subscribe, and comment. We'd love to hear from you. Similarly, we'd love to hear from you if you have an interesting story to tell about M&A deals that you've engaged with, although also a topic that you might want us to discuss. Feel free to email us on thedealist@sscinc.com. And that's all that we have time for today. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.